The merchant vessel Gentle Current drifted through the asteroid field, its hull scarred and bleeding atmosphere from a dozen puncture wounds. Inside the cramped bridge, Captain Zathara clutched her injured arm while her navigation officer worked frantically at the controls. The Corvani pirate ships had come out of nowhere, their weapons tearing through the Gentle Current's minimal shields like tissue paper. "Captain, the hyperdrive is completely offline," reported her engineer, his blue-scaled hands trembling as he read the damage reports. "Hull breaches on decks 3 through 7. We're losing life support." Zathara's people, the Villani, were known throughout the galaxy as peaceful traders. Their ships carried no weapons beyond basic defensive systems, relying instead on speed and diplomacy to navigate the dangerous trade routes between star systems. But speed meant nothing with a dead hyperdrive, and diplomacy was useless against Corvani raiders who shot first and looted the wreckage later. "Sir, I'm detecting another ship approaching," the sensor operator announced, his voice tight with fear. It's small. Single occupant by the looks of it." Zathara closed her eyes. Another pirate, most likely, coming to claim whatever scraps the main raiding party had left behind. Her crew of 43 souls would die here, in this forgotten corner of space, and their families would never know what happened to them. "Captain," the sensor operator's voice had changed, filled with confusion now instead of fear. "The approaching vessel, it's broadcasting on all frequencies. The message says, 'This is Captain Sarah Chen of the Earth vessel Defiant Dawn. Any pirates in this area, you have 10 seconds to withdraw, or I will consider you hostile.'" "Earth?" Zathara opened her eyes. She'd heard of humans, of course. The newest species to achieve interstellar travel, barely a century ago. They were considered primitive by most galactic standards, their technology crude but functional. More importantly, they had no established trade relationships, no alliances, no reason to risk their lives for a Villani merchant ship. The communication board crackled to life. "Villani vessel, this is Captain Chen. Are you in need of assistance?" Zathara hesitated. Accepting help from an unknown species could create diplomatic complications. But looking around her damaged bridge, watching her crew struggle to keep their ship together, she realized they had no choice. "Captain Chen, this is Captain Zathara of the merchant vessel Gentle Current. We are under attack by Corvani pirates. Our hyperdrive is destroyed and we have multiple hull breaches. We would be grateful for any assistance you can provide." "Copy that, Captain. I count 3 pirate vessels still in the area. Recommend you maintain course and heading while I deal with them." "Deal with them?" Zathara stared at the communication panel. The human ship was barely larger than a shuttle according to their sensors. How could one small vessel face 3 Corvani raiders? On the main screen, she watched as the human ship moved with impossible precision through the asteroid field. The Defiant Dawn was sleek and angular, clearly built for combat rather than commerce. But it was still outnumbered 3 to 1. The lead Corvani raider opened fire first, plasma bolts streaking through space toward the human vessel. What happened next defied everything Zathara knew about space combat. The human ship didn't attempt to evade in a predictable pattern. Instead, it moved like something alive, twisting and rolling through 3 dimensions with an organic fluidity that made it nearly impossible to target. "How is that pilot pulling those kinds of G-forces?" her navigation officer whispered. The human ship returned fire and Zathara gasped. Instead of the energy weapons used by most galactic civilizations, the Defiant Dawn launched physical projectiles. Kinetic rounds that moved so fast they appeared as streaks of light on the sensors. The first Corvani raider's shields flared and died under the barrage, its hull cracking open like an egg. But the other 2 pirates had flanked the human ship. Plasma fire converged on the Defiant Dawn from 2 directions, and there was no way to avoid both attacks. Zathara was certain she was about to watch her would-be rescuer die. The human ship did something impossible. It fired its main engines at full power while simultaneously activating maneuvering thrusters, creating a controlled spin that sent it tumbling end over end. The plasma bolts passed harmlessly through the space where it had been a microsecond before. Without stopping its rotation, the Defiant Dawn fired again, its kinetic rounds punching through the second raider's engine section. The third pirate tried to flee, but the human ship was faster. Much faster. It caught up with the Corvani vessel in seconds and disabled it with surgical precision, targeting weapon systems and engines without destroying the ship entirely. Within minutes, all 3 pirate vessels were either destroyed or disabled, and the human ship was drifting alongside the gentle current. Captain Zathara, this is Captain Chen. Do you require assistance with repairs? Yes, we do. But Captain Chen, you've just saved 43 lives. Our people have a custom of offering payment for such service. What would you ask for? There was a pause. Payment? Captain, I'm not sure what you mean. You were in trouble, so I helped. That's what people do. Zathara felt something strange in her chest. Among her people, among most species in the galaxy, nothing was given freely. Every action had a price, every favor created a debt. But this human spoke as if helping strangers was the most natural thing in the universe. We have medical supplies aboard, Captain Chen continued, and repair drones. I can have your life support stabilized within the hour, and your hyperdrive should be repairable once we patch those hull breaches. Captain, surely there must be something we can offer you. Information about trade routes, perhaps? Coordinates for safe harbors? Well, the human's voice carried a note of amusement. I wouldn't say no to a good meal once we get you fixed up. I've been eating ration bars for 3 weeks straight. Over the next several hours, Zathara watched in amazement as the human captain worked alongside her crew. Captain Chen was smaller than most Volani, but she moved with quiet confidence and seemed to understand their ship's systems better than some of their own engineers. She shared her repair drones freely, offered medical treatment to the injured crew members, and refused every attempt at formal payment. When the repairs were complete and the gentle current was ready for hyperspace, Zathara made a decision that would change the course of galactic history. Captain Chen, I need to ask you something. My people will want to know who saved us today. They will want to honor you, to offer trade agreements and formal alliance. But more than that, they will want to know why you risked your life for strangers. The human was quiet for a long moment. Captain, where I come from, we have a saying. The only thing necessary for evil to triumph is for good people to do nothing. You weren't evil, and those pirates were. The choice was pretty simple. As the Defiant Dawn disappeared into hyperspace, heading for whatever distant mission had brought it to this remote corner of space, Zathara began composing her report to the Volani Trade Council. She had no idea that her words would soon reach the ears of the Corvani High Command, or that they would respond to this insult with overwhelming force. She had no idea that she had just signed Earth's death warrant. The Corvani War Council chamber echoed with the sound of clawed fists striking metal tables. Supreme Commander Thrax stood at the center of the circular room, his massive frame casting shadows across the assembled military leaders. The Corvani were apex predators from a harsh world where only the strongest survived, and they had built their interstellar empire on that same principle. Explain to me again, Thrax growled, his voice like grinding stone, how 3 of our raider vessels were destroyed by a single ship from a species we've never heard of. Fleet Commander Gorvac shifted uncomfortably in his seat. The scar across his left eye twitched as he spoke. The human vessel was small, but its weapons were unlike anything in our databases. Kinetic projectiles moving at relativistic speeds. Their pilot showed impossible reflexes and maneuverability. One ship, Thrax repeated. One ship destroyed 2 raiders and disabled a third. Ships that had successfully hunted in that sector for over a year. Yes, Supreme Commander. And this human helped a Volani merchant vessel for no compensation whatsoever? According to the intercepted communications, yes. Thrax's roar shook the chamber. The Corvani Empire was built on fear and strength. For 300 years they had raided and conquered with impunity, because everyone knew the price of resistance. Ships fled when they saw Corvani colors. Planets paid tribute rather than face bombardment. But this human had not fled. This human had fought back and won. If we allow this to stand, Thrax said, his voice deadly quiet now, what message does it send? That any primitive species with enough courage can humiliate the Corvani Empire? That our raiders can be defeated by merchant escorts? Sir, ventured Admiral Kresh from the far side of the table. Perhaps this was an isolated incident. One ship does not represent a species' military capability. One ship destroyed 3 of ours. Thrax slammed his fist down, cracking the metal surface. But you're right about one thing, Admiral. One ship does not represent a species' military capability, which is why we're going to find out exactly what these humans are capable of. He activated the holographic display at the center of the table. A star map appeared, showing the known galaxy with trade routes marked in blue and Corvani territory in red. A small yellow dot appeared in a previously unmarked region. Intelligence has located the human homeworld, a system they call Sol, third planet from their star. Population approximately 8 billion. They have colonies on 3 other worlds in their system and a handful of outposts within 20 light-years of their home. 8 billion? Admiral Kresh leaned forward. That's nearly as large as our own population. Yes, but scattered across primitive worlds with minimal defenses. Our scouts report their space navy consists of fewer than 200 vessels, most of them exploratory or merchant ships. They've been spacefaring for less than a century. Fleet Commander Gorvak studied the display. What are your orders, Supreme Commander? We will make an example of these humans that will echo across the galaxy for generations. But first we gather intelligence. I want to know everything about their military capabilities, their weapons technology, their social structure. Then we strike. A full invasion? No, Thrax smiled, revealing rows of sharp teeth. Something worse. We will demonstrate the price of interfering with Corvani operations. We will glass their homeworld, destroy their colonies, and hunt down every human ship in space. When we're finished, the species will exist only in history files as a cautionary tale. 3 weeks later, Captain Sarah Chen sat in the briefing room aboard the Earth Defense Force station orbiting Luna. Around the table sat the commanding officers of humanity's modest space fleet, their faces grim as they reviewed the intelligence reports that had been trickling in from the outer colonies. The pattern is clear, said Admiral Martinez, the weathered commander of Earth's home fleet. Someone has been conducting surveillance on all our major installations. Our deep space monitoring posts have detected at least 30 different unknown vessels over the past month. Corvani? Asked Captain Chen. We think so. The energy signatures match what you recorded during your encounter with their raiders. Admiral Martinez touched a control, and the holographic display showed a map of human space. Red markers indicated where unknown ships had been detected. They're being systematic about it. Every military installation, every colony, every major shipping route. Captain Lisa Park, commander of the Outer Colonies Defense Squadron, shook her head. 30 scout ships suggest a major operation. This isn't random piracy. They're planning something big. The question is what? Admiral Martinez leaned back in his chair. Our Xenology department has been analyzing everything we know about Corvani culture. They're a predator species with a rigid hierarchy based on strength and dominance. What Sarah did to their raiders wasn't just a military defeat. It was a public humiliation. Captain Chen felt a cold weight in her stomach. You think they're coming for us because I helped the Villani? I think they're coming for us because you proved they could be beaten. And in their culture, that cannot be allowed to stand. Sir, Captain Park spoke up, our intelligence on the Corvani Empire is limited, but what we do know is concerning. They've been expanding for 3 centuries. Their military is estimated at over 50,000 warships, ranging from raider-class vessels like the ones Sarah encountered, to dreadnoughts the size of small cities. The room fell silent. 50,000 ships against humanity's 200. It wasn't a war, it was an execution. There's something else, Admiral Martinez continued. We've been monitoring galactic communication networks. Word of Sarah's action has spread far beyond the Corvani Empire. The Villani have been telling everyone who will listen about the human who risked her life to save strangers. Other species are starting to take notice. What kind of notice? Chen asked. Mixed reactions. Some are impressed by what they see as noble behavior. Others think we're naive fools who don't understand how the galaxy works. But there's a third group that's more interesting. The display changed, showing communication intercepts from across known space. Species that have been victims of Corvani aggression. Worlds that have paid tribute for decades. They're watching to see what happens to us. Captain Park understood immediately. They want to know if the Corvani can actually be defeated. Exactly. Which means this isn't just about humanity anymore. If we somehow survive what's coming, it could inspire resistance movements across the galaxy. If we're destroyed, then the Corvani Empire becomes stronger than ever. Chen finished. Admiral Martinez stood, his expression resolute. Ladies and gentlemen, I won't lie to you. The odds against us are overwhelming. We're outnumbered, outgunned, and facing an enemy with centuries of military experience. But we have advantages they don't expect. He gestured to the display, which now showed technical specifications for human warships. Our technology may be newer, but it's also different. We've developed kinetic weapons because we couldn't master energy shields the way other species have. Our ships are built for speed and maneuverability because we couldn't match the firepower of established galactic powers. Our pilots are trained differently too, added Captain Chen. Most galactic species have relatively slow reflexes compared to humans. We evolved as pursuit predators on a high-gravity world. Our reaction times and spatial reasoning are beyond what they expect. All true, Admiral Martinez nodded. But our greatest advantage is something the Corvani can't understand. They fight for dominance, for territory, for the right to rule others. We're going to be fighting for something much more powerful. What's that, sir? The right to help people. The right to choose kindness over cruelty. The right to stand up for those who can't stand up for themselves. His voice grew stronger. Captain Chen helped the Villani because it was the right thing to do. Now the galaxy is going to learn what happens when you threaten someone for doing the right thing. As the meeting broke up and the officers returned to their ships, none of them noticed the small communication device hidden in the ventilation system. The Corvani spy probe had been recording everything, and Supreme Commander Thrax was already smiling as he listened to the humans' pathetic plans. 200 ships against 50,000. It would be over in a matter of hours. The Corvani armada emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the Sol system like a plague of metal locusts. 500 massive warships formed the vanguard, their hulls bristling with plasma cannons and torpedo tubes. Behind them came the troop transports and support vessels, a force large enough to conquer a dozen star systems. Supreme Commander Thrax stood on the bridge of his flagship, the World Ender, and gazed at the small blue-green planet that hung in the distance. Such a tiny thing to cause so much trouble. In a few hours it would be nothing but molten slag. Fleet status report, he commanded. All vessels in position, Supreme Commander, reported his aide. Long-range sensors show the human home fleet moving to intercept. 37 vessels ranging from cruiser to dreadnought class. Thrax's laugh rumbled through the bridge. 37 ships? Did they not receive the intelligence reports about our fleet size? Sir, there may be additional vessels hidden in the asteroid belt or behind the larger planets. Our scouts detected approximately 200 human warships over the past months. 200 or 37, it makes no difference. Begin the assault. I want the human fleet destroyed within the hour. Then we proceed to planetary bombardment. But as the Corvani fleet advanced, something unexpected happened. The human ships didn't form a traditional battle line. Instead, they scattered into small groups, using the system's asteroids and planets as cover. Their movements were erratic, almost random. Sir, the tactical officer reported, the humans are not engaging in standard fleet combat protocols. They appear to be hiding. Cowards, Thrax spat. Run them down. Destroy them one by one if necessary. The first engagement came near Jupiter's moons. A group of 5 Corvani heavy cruisers cornered 3 human vessels that had been lurking behind Io. The Corvani ships moved in for the kill, confident in their overwhelming firepower advantage. The human ships opened fire first. The kinetic rounds struck the lead Corvani cruiser before its shields could fully activate. Instead of the expected energy weapons that shields were designed to deflect, solid projectiles moving at significant fractions of light speed punched through the defensive barriers, like they weren't there. The cruiser's hull cracked open, atmosphere and crew streaming into space. What was that? Thrax demanded. Sir, the human weapons appear to be kinetic in nature, physical projectiles rather than energy beams. Our shields are designed primarily for energy weapon defense. Before Thrax could respond, reports flooded in from across the battlefield. The humans weren't just using kinetic weapons, they were using them with impossible precision. Their gunners seemed to anticipate Corvani movement patterns, leading their targets with an accuracy that defied explanation. How are they predicting our maneuvers? The tactical officer asked. The answer came from an unexpected source. The communication board crackled to life and a human voice filled the bridge of the World Ender. Corvani Fleet. This is Admiral Martinez of the Earth Defense Force. You have entered our star system with hostile intent and attacked our vessels. Withdraw immediately or face the consequences. Thrax keyed the response himself. I am Supreme Commander Thrax of the Corvani Empire. You will surrender unconditionally or watch your homeworld burn. You are outnumbered 15-1. Commander Thrax. The human admiral's voice was calm, almost conversational. Before you do something you'll regret, I want you to understand something about humans. We've been watching your ships for weeks. We've analyzed your tactics, your formation patterns, your preferred attack vectors. We know how you fight. Impossible. Our fleet movements are classified at the highest levels. Your ships move like predators from a pack-hunting species. You use encirclement tactics because that's how your ancestors hunted. You prefer to attack from multiple directions because it triggers prey responses in most galactic species. The Admiral paused. But humans aren't prey, Commander. We're persistence hunters. We don't give up, we don't panic, and we learn from everything we observe. As if to prove his point, another group of human ships struck a Corvani formation from an impossible angle. They had used a gas giant's gravity well to slingshot themselves into an attack vector that the Corvani sensors hadn't detected until it was too late. Sir? The tactical officer's voice was strained. We're taking heavy casualties. The humans are using our own formation patterns against us. Every time we move to engage one group, another attacks from our blind spots. Thrax watched the tactical display in growing disbelief. His carefully organized fleet was being torn apart by an enemy a fraction of its size. The human ships moved like ghosts, appearing where they shouldn't be, striking with surgical precision, then vanishing before retaliation could arrive. Deploy all fighters, he ordered. Overwhelm them with numbers. Thousands of Corvani fighter craft launched from the larger vessels, filling space with a cloud of small, fast-moving targets. But instead of engaging the fighters directly, the human ships did something unprecedented. They began launching clouds of small metal objects into space. What are they doing? Thrax demanded. The answer became clear moments later. The metal objects were simple iron balls, thousands of them, released in carefully calculated patterns. At the speeds involved in space combat, even a small piece of metal became a devastating weapon. The Corvani fighters, designed for precision dogfighting, flew directly into what amounted to massive shotgun blasts. Fighter after fighter was torn apart by the metal spheres. The survivors found themselves facing human fighter pilots who moved with reflexes that seemed impossible. The humans pulled maneuvers that should have killed them through acceleration alone, twisted through three-dimensional combat patterns that made no sense to pilots trained in conventional tactics. Sir, fighter squadrons are reporting 70% casualties, the communications officer announced. The surviving pilots say the human fighters move like they're alive. On the main screen, Thrax watched a human fighter craft spiral through a complex evasion pattern while being pursued by 3 Corvani pilots. The human ship was smaller, less armored, and carried fewer weapons. By all rights, it should have been destroyed within seconds. Instead, it led its pursuers into the debris field of a destroyed Corvani cruiser. The human pilot navigated through the wreckage with millimeter precision, using chunks of metal and ice as cover. When the Corvani fighters tried to follow, they found themselves flying through a maze of obstacles at speeds that made precision flying nearly impossible. 2 of the 3 pursuers collided with debris. The third found itself alone, facing a human pilot who had somehow reversed course and was now behind it. This is impossible, Thrax whispered. They're outnumbered. They should be dead. Sir, the tactical officer's voice was barely controlled panic now. The humans have just launched something from their home planet, multiple objects moving at extreme velocity. On the display, dozens of new contacts appeared, accelerating out of Earth's gravity well at speeds that seemed impossible for vessels of their size. But as they got closer, it became clear they weren't vessels at all. Kinetic impactors, the sensor operator reported. Solid metal rods approximately 20 meters in length, moving at significant fractions of light speed. The kinetic kill vehicles had been launched from Earth's surface using mass drivers built into the planet's highest mountains. They were simple weapons, nothing more than tungsten rods with basic guidance systems. But at relativistic speeds, they carried the destructive power of nuclear weapons. The first impactor struck a Corvani battleship amidships. The tungsten rod punched through the vessel's armor like tissue paper, its kinetic energy vaporizing everything it touched. The battleship broke in half, its reactor core exploding in a brilliant flash. Evasive maneuvers, Thrax screamed, but it was too late. The human weapons struck with mathematical precision. Each impactor targeted at a different vessel. Battleships, cruisers, and destroyers died in brilliant flashes of light as tungsten rods moving at thousands of kilometers per second tore them apart. Sir, we've lost over 100 ships, the tactical officer reported. The fleet is in disarray. Request permission to withdraw and regroup. Thrax stared at the tactical display in shock. His invincible armada was being destroyed by primitives who had been spacefaring for less than a century. Ships that had conquered dozens of worlds were being outfought by vessels a tenth their size. "No," he growled. "We do not retreat. All ships converge on the human homeworld. If we cannot defeat their fleet, we will destroy their planet." But as the surviving Corvani ships began their final push toward Earth, Admiral Martinez's voice filled the communication channels once more. "Commander Thrax, you should know that we've been broadcasting this entire battle across the galaxy. Every species, every world that has suffered under Corvani oppression is watching right now. They're seeing that you can be beaten. They're seeing that bullies, no matter how big, can be stood up to." The Admiral paused, and when he spoke again, his voice carried the weight of absolute conviction. "You came here to punish us for helping someone in need, but you've just taught the entire galaxy the most important lesson in human history. When good people stand together, evil cannot win." Across the galaxy on 1,000 different worlds, beings who had lived under the shadow of Corvani terror watched their screens in stunned silence. The impossible was happening. The unstoppable Corvani Empire was not just being resisted, it was being defeated. On the mining world of Kepler 442b, a Villani overseer named Vextar paused in his daily reports to the Corvani tribute collectors. For 15 years, his people had surrendered 30% of their mineral output to prevent orbital bombardment. The Corvani had promised death to any world that resisted, and everyone believed them. But the tactical display showing the Sol system told a different story. Human ships, outnumbered 10 to 1, were systematically dismantling a Corvani battle fleet. It wasn't luck or superior technology. It was strategy, courage, and something the galaxy had forgotten existed: the willingness to fight for principles rather than profit. "Supervisor Vextar," his assistant called out, "the weekly tribute shipment is ready for transport." Vextar looked at the cargo manifest, then at the screen showing human fighters dancing through space like deadly angels. "Cancel the shipment, sir?" "You heard me, cancel it. And send a message to the miners. Tell them to seal the tunnels. We're not sending anything to the Corvani today." Similar scenes played out across dozens of worlds. The Corvani Empire's power had always been based on fear, on the certainty that resistance was futile. But the humans had shattered that certainty. If primitives with inferior technology could stand against the Empire, what excuse did anyone else have? In the Sol system, Supreme Commander Thrax was learning that desperation could be as dangerous as courage. With over half his fleet destroyed and the remainder scattered across the inner planets, he made a decision that would haunt the galaxy for generations. "All ships, ignore the human fleet," he commanded. "Full speed to their homeworld. We will glass the planet from orbit. Let them watch their species die." The remaining Corvani vessels, nearly 200 heavy warships, broke off from individual engagements and formed a massive spearhead aimed directly at Earth. Their combined firepower was more than enough to crack a planet's crust and boil away its oceans. Admiral Martinez, aboard the human flagship Indomitable, watched the enemy formation with grim satisfaction. This was exactly what they had hoped would happen. "All ships, execute Protocol 7, he transmitted on an encrypted channel. Across the Sol system, human vessels that had been fighting individual battles suddenly disengaged. Instead of pursuing fleeing Corvani ships, they began moving toward predetermined coordinates. Within minutes, every surviving human warship was accelerating toward Earth on intercept courses that would bring them into contact with the enemy formation. "Sir," Captain Chen transmitted from the Defiant Dawn, "my squadron is in position at Waypoint Alpha. We're ready." "Acknowledged." Captain Park, report. "Outer Rim Squadron in position at Waypoint Beta. All ships armed and ready." Similar reports came in from across the fleet. The humans weren't retreating to defend their homeworld. They were using the Corvani desperation against them, channeling the entire enemy fleet into a carefully prepared killing ground. "All ships," Admiral Martinez announced on an open channel that he knew the Corvani were monitoring. "This is our moment. Everything we've trained for, everything we've prepared for, comes down to the next 10 minutes. We're not just fighting for Earth. We're fighting for the idea that decent people can stand up to bullies. We're fighting for every species that has ever been told to surrender or die." The Corvani fleet was moving at maximum burn toward Earth, their ships strung out in a long formation as faster vessels outpaced slower ones. They were confident that their overwhelming firepower would make any human defense irrelevant. They were wrong. The first surprise came when Earth's moon suddenly lit up like a star. Hidden mass drivers built into lunar mining facilities began launching kinetic impactors at a rate of 1 every 30 seconds. The tungsten rods streaked across space in perfectly calculated trajectories, each one timed to arrive at a specific point in space at a specific moment. The Corvani fleet flew directly into the bombardment. Ship after ship was torn apart by relativistic tungsten, their hulls vaporized by impacts that released more energy than nuclear weapons. But the survivors pressed on, knowing that once they reached Earth, the mass drivers would be unable to target them without hitting the planet itself. The second surprise came from Earth's asteroid belt. What the Corvani had assumed were mining stations were actually disguised weapons platforms. As the enemy fleet passed through the belt, hidden railguns opened fire from seemingly empty rocks. The crossfire was devastating, catching Corvani ships in a three-dimensional killing field. But the greatest surprise was waiting in Earth's upper atmosphere. As the surviving Corvani ships entered orbital range, preparing to begin their bombardment, the planet's surface erupted in light. Thousands of launch points across every continent began firing simultaneously. But these weren't more kinetic weapons. They were ships, small, fast attack craft that had been hidden in underground bunkers across Earth's surface. Each one carried a single pilot, minimal life support, and enough firepower to cripple a cruiser. They rose from the planet like an avenging swarm, their engines leaving brilliant contrails against the blue sky. "Impossible," Thrax whispered. "Our intelligence said they had 200 ships. Where did these come from?" The answer was simple but devastating. Earth's entire civilian space industry had been converted to military production. Every commercial shipyard, every mining vessel construction facility, every orbital platform had been building these small attack craft in secret. The merchant ships that Corvani scouts had observed were actually military vessels in disguise. But most importantly, every single craft was piloted by a volunteer. When Earth's government had announced the coming invasion, 8 billion humans had volunteered to fight. The selection process had been brutal, but the message was clear. Humanity would not go quietly into extinction. Captain Chen, leading the first wave of surface-launched fighters, opened her communication channel to the entire Corvani fleet. "Corvani ships, you came here to punish us for helping someone in need. You wanted to make an example of us. Well, congratulations. You're about to become an example yourselves." The space around Earth became a maelstrom of fire and metal. Human fighters swarmed over Corvani capital ships like angry wasps, their smaller size and superior maneuverability, allowing them to avoid most return fire. They targeted engines, weapon systems, and command centers with surgical precision. But the Corvani weren't defenseless. Their remaining ships fought with the desperation of cornered predators, their heavy weapons carving through human formations. The space around Earth filled with debris and expanding clouds of gas as ships from both sides died in brilliant explosions. "Sir," Thrax's tactical officer reported, "we're taking heavy casualties. Recommend immediate withdrawal." "No," Thrax's roar echoed through the bridge. "We came here to destroy this world, and we will destroy it. All ships ramming speed. If we cannot burn their planet, we will crack it with our hulls." The remaining Corvani vessels, perhaps 50 heavy warships, began accelerating directly toward Earth's surface. If they could reach the planet and detonate their antimatter cores simultaneously, the resulting explosion would be enough to shatter the world. But the humans had one more surprise waiting. As the Corvani ships entered the final phase of their death dive, Earth's orbital defense platforms finally revealed themselves. What had appeared to be civilian space stations suddenly unfolded massive weapon arrays. These weren't kinetic weapons or fighters. They were gravity manipulators. The platforms generated localized gravitational fields that caught the diving Corvani ships like insects in amber. The massive warships found themselves slowing against their will, their engines unable to overcome the artificial gravity wells that had been positioned in their path. "What is this?" Thrax demanded as his flagship shuddered to a halt just outside Earth's atmosphere. "This," Admiral Martinez's voice came over the communication channel, "is what happens when you threaten our home." The gravity platforms held the Corvani ships motionless while human fighters swarmed over them. Without the ability to maneuver, the massive warships became sitting targets. One by one, their hulls were breached, their crews forced to surrender or die. Supreme Commander Thrax, watching his empire's greatest fleet destroyed by a species he had dismissed as primitives, finally understood the magnitude of his mistake. The humans hadn't just defeated his forces through superior technology or numbers. They had outfought him through something the Corvani Empire had never encountered: absolute determination to protect what they believed in. As his flagship's systems failed around him and human boarding parties prepared to take him prisoner, Thrax made one final communication to his home fleet. "This is Supreme Commander Thrax to all Corvani forces. Do not underestimate the humans. They are not what they appear to be. They fight not for conquest or dominance, but for ideas. And ideas, it seems, are more dangerous than any weapon." The transmission cut off as human Marines breached the bridge. As they took him into custody, Thrax realized that the galaxy would never be the same. The humans that bullies could be beaten, and they... The news of the Corvani defeat rippled across the galaxy like a shockwave. On the Corvani homeworld of Korath Prime, the High Council gathered in emergency session as reports flooded in from across their empire. The unthinkable had happened. Their greatest fleet had been destroyed by a species most of them had never heard of just days before. "This cannot be accurate," growled General Vashkar, his claws scraping against the metal table. 500 ships cannot simply vanish. There must be some mistake." "The mistake," replied Intelligence Director Morgan, her voice cold as winter, "was underestimating these humans. We have confirmation from surviving vessels and intercepted galactic communications. Supreme Commander Thrax is dead, along with 90% of the expeditionary force." The silence that followed was deafening. The Corvani Empire had not suffered a major military defeat in over 2 centuries. Their expansion had been built on the certainty that resistance was futile, that their technological and numerical superiority made victory inevitable. "How is this possible?" demanded High Counselor Drexnor. "Our intelligence indicated they had primitive technology and minimal military forces. Our intelligence was wrong. The humans masked their true capabilities, appearing weak while secretly preparing for war. They used unconventional weapons, tactics we had never encountered, and most importantly, they displayed a level of tactical innovation that our commanders were unprepared for. But the real crisis wasn't the military defeat itself. It was what was happening across the galaxy as a result. On the main display, a map of Corvani space showed dozens of red warning indicators. Tribute worlds were rebelling. Vassal states were declaring independence. Species that had paid protection, money for generations, were suddenly refusing to comply. Kepler, 442b, has sealed their mining operations and declared themselves a free world, reported the communications officer. The Altair colonies have expelled our garrison forces. The Proxima Centauri trade routes are being blocked by local defense forces. "How many worlds?" asked High Counselor Drexnor. 47 rebellions confirmed, with more reports coming in every hour. The humans are broadcasting recordings of the battle across all communication networks. Every species in the galaxy has seen our fleet destroyed. General Vashkar slammed his fist on the table. "Then we crush them all. Send the home fleet to each rebellious world. Demonstrate the price of defiance. With what ships?" Intelligence Director Morgan's question stopped him cold. "We sent our most advanced vessels against the humans. The home fleet consists primarily of older ships designed for patrol and occupation duties. And even if we had the military strength, we cannot be everywhere at once." The truth was becoming clear to everyone in the room. The Corvani Empire's power had always been more illusion than reality. They controlled vast territories through fear and the threat of overwhelming retaliation, but that threat had been built on the assumption that they would never face significant resistance. The humans had shattered that assumption, and the psychological effect was spreading like wildfire. "Sir," the communications officer spoke up again, "we're receiving a transmission from the human homeworld. They're requesting direct communication with the High Council." "Requesting?" General Vashkar's laugh was bitter. "They destroy our fleet and then request an audience? The arrogance of these primitives knows no bounds." "Put them through," ordered High Counselor Drexnor. "Let's hear what they have to say." The main screen shifted from the galactic map to show the interior of what appeared to be a human military command center. A single human sat at a simple desk, wearing a plain uniform with minimal decoration. This was Admiral Martinez, the architect of humanity's impossible victory. "High Counselor Drexnor," the human began, his voice calm and professional. "I am Admiral Martinez of the Earth Defense Force. I'm speaking to you today to discuss the future relationship between our species. You dare speak of relationships after slaughtering our people? General Vashkar growled. General, your people came to our system with the stated intention of committing genocide. We defended ourselves. The deaths that occurred were the direct result of Corvani aggression, not human malice. You attacked our raider vessels first. We protected innocent merchants from armed pirates. If the Corvani Empire claims those pirates as official representatives, then your empire is built on theft and murder. The calm certainty in the human's voice was more infuriating than any insult could have been. High Counselor Drexnor raised a hand for silence before the conversation could deteriorate further. What is it you want, Admiral Martinez? Peace, but not the peace of submission that your empire has imposed on others. We want a real peace based on mutual respect and the right of all species to determine their own destiny. Impossible. The galaxy requires order. The strong must rule the weak, or there is only chaos. With respect, High Counselor, you're wrong. We've seen what happens when bullies are allowed to operate without opposition. It doesn't create order, it creates fear. And fear breeds hatred, resentment, and eventually revolution. As if to underscore his point, another red indicator appeared on the Council's tactical display. Another world had declared independence. We offer you a choice, Admiral Martinez continued. The Corvani Empire can continue trying to rule through fear and force, or it can become part of a larger galactic community based on cooperation and mutual benefit. And if we refuse, then you'll find yourselves facing not just humanity but every species you've oppressed. The galaxy has seen that you can be defeated. That knowledge can't be taken back. Intelligence Director Morgan leaned forward. You're threatening us? No, Director. I'm offering you a chance to survive. Your empire is already falling apart. The question is whether it collapses into chaos or transforms into something better. The transmission ended, leaving the Corvani High Council in stunned silence. Outside the council chambers, reports continued to pour in of rebellions, defections, and military disasters across their territory. Within days, the situation had deteriorated beyond all control. The Corvani home fleet found itself fighting on dozens of fronts simultaneously, as subject worlds erupted in coordinated uprisings. Worse, many of these rebellions were being supported by external forces. The Villani Trade Council, emboldened by human success, had sent humanitarian supplies to besieged worlds. The Altarian Republic provided communication technology to coordinate resistance movements. Even species that had remained neutral for centuries began openly supporting the rebels. But the most devastating blow came from an unexpected source: the Corvani military itself. Fleet Admiral Kex Thrall, commanding the Second Fleet in the Outer Rim territories, made a decision that would echo through history. Instead of attempting to suppress the rebellions in his sector, he negotiated a ceasefire with the rebel forces and opened peace talks. The old ways are dying, he announced in a message broadcast to the entire galaxy. We can either die with them or help build something better. I choose to build. Within weeks, half the Corvani military had followed his example. The empire that had dominated a quarter of the galaxy for 3 centuries was fragmenting into dozens of independent systems. Some remained loyal to the traditional hierarchy, others formed new alliances, and many simply declared neutrality. The transformation wasn't without bloodshed. Die-hard loyalists fought bitter campaigns against both rebels and defectors. Some worlds were devastated by civil wars between those who wanted freedom and those who feared change. But for every battle fought, 10 more potential conflicts were resolved through negotiation and compromise. The humans, for their part, became the galaxy's unexpected mediators. Their victory had given them moral authority. But more importantly, their actions proved they weren't interested in conquest. When invited to liberate former Corvani worlds, they instead helped establish independent governments. When asked to station fleets in strategic systems, they offered training and defensive alliances instead. We didn't fight the Corvani to replace them, Admiral Martinez explained to a gathering of galactic leaders on the neutral world of New Geneva. We fought them to prove that tyranny doesn't have to be tolerated. The galaxy belongs to all of us, not just the strongest. Captain Sarah Chen, the woman whose simple act of kindness had started the chain of events, found herself in an unexpected position. The Villani had proposed creating a new galactic organization, dedicated to protecting merchant ships and peaceful travelers. They wanted her to lead it. I'm just a ship captain, she protested during a meeting with Ambassador Zathara, the former merchant captain, who had become the Villani's representative. To the emerging Galactic Alliance, you're the ship captain, who proved that doing the right thing matters. More than doing the safe thing, Zathara replied. The galaxy needs leaders who understand that distinction. As the old Corvani Empire crumbled and new alliances formed, one thing became clear to everyone watching. The humans had changed everything. Not through conquest or domination, but through the simple demonstration that courage and compassion were more powerful than fear and force. The age of empires built on terror was ending. What would replace it remained to be seen, but for the first time in centuries the galaxy dared to hope. 2 years after the Battle of Sol, the galaxy looked vastly different from the one that had trembled under Corvani rule. On the former fortress world of Stronghold Station, now renamed Haven Point, representatives from over 300 species gathered for the founding of the Galactic Cooperative Alliance. Captain Sarah Chen, now Admiral Chen of the newly formed Galactic Protection Service, stood before the massive assembly hall and marveled at what had grown from a single act of helping strangers in distress. Beings who had never spoken to each other before were working together to draft agreements on trade, defense, and mutual assistance. Hard to believe it all started with you stopping to help a broken-down merchant ship, said Admiral Martinez, joining her at the viewing gallery overlooking the diplomatic proceedings below. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I'd just minded my own business, Chen replied, watching as a group of former Corvani officers worked alongside Villani traders to establish new shipping safety protocols. The galaxy would still be living in fear, Martinez said simply. What you did wasn't just about saving one ship, Sarah. You showed everyone that there was another way to live. Below them, the debates continued in dozens of languages, with universal translators working overtime to keep communication flowing. The discussions weren't always peaceful. Centuries of distrust and old grievances didn't disappear overnight, but they were talking instead of fighting, negotiating instead of conquering. The transformation hadn't been easy or universally welcomed. Not all former Corvani territories had embraced freedom peacefully. Some systems had descended into chaos when central authority collapsed, while others had been taken over by local warlords who proved as brutal as their former masters. Humanity had found itself reluctantly drawn into these conflicts, not as conquerors, but as peacekeepers. The irony wasn't lost on anyone that the species that had sparked galactic revolution by helping a single merchant ship was now coordinating humanitarian missions across dozens of star systems. Admiral Chen, a familiar voice called out. She turned to see Ambassador Zathara approaching, her blue-scaled face showing the signs of exhaustion that had become common among the diplomats trying to forge a new galactic order. Ambassador, Chen greeted her warmly. How are the trade route negotiations progressing? Slowly, but we're making progress. The Corvani remnant states are finally agreeing to honor pre-war shipping contracts, and the Free Systems Coalition has opened 3 new trade corridors through their territory. Zathara paused, her expression growing more serious. But that's not why I wanted to speak with you. Chen felt a familiar chill. In the past 2 years, whenever someone approached her with that particular tone, it usually meant another crisis was brewing somewhere in the galaxy. We've received intelligence reports about something called the hegemony, Zathara continued. A coalition of species from the galactic rim who believe the fall of the Corvani Empire was a mistake. How big of a problem are we talking about? Martinez asked. Potentially enormous. They claim that the chaos following the Empire's collapse proves that democracy and cooperation are failed concepts. They're building a new authoritarian alliance based on the principle that only absolute order can prevent galactic war. Chen studied the diplomatic assembly below, where beings from hundreds of worlds were slowly, painfully learning to work together. How many species have joined this hegemony? 17 confirmed, with perhaps twice that number considering membership. They've been recruiting primarily from species that were never under Corvani rule, arguing that the rebellion only benefited former subjects while creating instability for everyone else. It was a legitimate concern, Chen had to admit. The fall of the Corvani Empire had created power vacuums in many regions. Trade routes that had been secure under imperial protection were now contested by multiple factions. Some worlds had prospered under their newfound freedom, while others struggled with the responsibilities of self-governance. What's their military capability? Martinez inquired with the professional interest of someone who had spent the last 2 years helping organize defensive alliances. Unknown, but growing. Intelligence suggests they've been developing new weapons technologies, specifically designed to counter the tactics we used against the Corvani. Energy weapons that can penetrate kinetic shields, fighters with enhanced maneuverability, capital ships built for speed rather than raw firepower. They've been studying our victories, Chen realized, learning from our successes to develop countermeasures. Exactly. And unlike the Corvani, who underestimated us due to arrogance, the hegemony considers humanity the primary threat to their vision of galactic order. A new conflict was brewing, one that could be far more dangerous than the Corvani War. The Empire had been powerful but complacent, certain of their superiority. The hegemony was building itself specifically to fight the kind of war humanity had proven capable of winning. There's something else, Zethara added quietly. The hegemony has been making contact with Corvani remnant forces. They're offering military support and advanced weapons in exchange for joining their alliance. The implications were staggering. If the hegemony could unite the scattered Corvani factions under their banner, they would have access to hundreds of experienced military commanders who understood both Corvani and human tactical doctrines. How long do we have? Chen asked. Our best estimates suggest they'll be ready to begin major operations within 6 months. They're calling it the stabilization campaign, with the stated goal of bringing order to the chaos that followed the Empire's fall. Martinez frowned. Stabilization campaigns have a way of turning into conquest campaigns once they get started. Which is why we need to be ready, Chen said, her mind already working through the strategic implications. The question is, can the Alliance hold together in the face of this threat? As if summoned by her words, a commotion erupted in the assembly hall below. The delegates from the Antaran sovereignty were walking out of the trade negotiations, their ambassador shouting something about unfair human influence over Alliance policies. That's been happening more frequently, Zethara observed. Some species are starting to resent what they see as human dominance over galactic affairs. They argue that we've simply replaced Corvani hegemony with human hegemony. Chen watched the Antaran delegation storm out, followed by representatives from 3 other species. The Grand Alliance that had seemed so promising just hours ago was already showing cracks. Maybe they have a point, she said quietly. We never wanted to rule anyone, but somehow we've ended up at the center of every major decision. Because you're the only ones who've proven you can win against overwhelming odds, Martinez pointed out. When people are scared, they look to whoever offers the best chance of survival. But that's exactly what the hegemony is counting on, Chen realized. They want species to see the Alliance as human-dominated. It validates their argument that democracy is just another form of tyranny. The irony was bitter. Humanity had fought to prove that freedom was worth defending, but their very success had made them the dominant power in the galaxy they'd helped liberate. Other species looked to them for leadership, protection, and solutions to problems they couldn't solve themselves. We need to change how this works, Chen said decisively. The Alliance can't be seen as a human organization with alien members. It has to be a true partnership of equals. Easier said than done, Zethara replied. Many species joined specifically because they trusted human leadership. If we step back, some might withdraw their support. Then we'll have to find a way to lead by example instead of by authority, Chen said. Show other species that they can handle their own problems without our direct intervention. As they spoke, reports continued to arrive from across the galaxy. The hegemony was broadcasting propaganda messages claiming that the Alliance was a human puppet state designed to exploit former Corvani territories. Some species were beginning to listen, especially those who had struggled with the transition to self-governance. Admiral, Martinez said quietly, what if we can't hold the Alliance together? What if the galaxy splits into competing factions? Chen looked down at the assembly hall, where delegates were still arguing about trade regulations and mutual defense agreements. Despite the walkouts and heated debates, hundreds of species were still working together, still trying to build something better than what had come before. Then we fight anyway, she said, not to preserve human influence or Alliance unity, but to preserve the idea that people should be free to choose their own destiny. Even if they choose to reject us. The challenge ahead was greater than anything they had faced during the Corvani War. Then they had fought against a clear enemy with obvious evil intentions. Now they faced the much more complex task of proving that freedom and cooperation could work even when it was difficult, even when it was messy, even when it seemed easier to surrender liberty for the promise of order. The hegemony was coming, armed with advanced weapons and the bitter lessons learned from Corvani defeats. But they would face not just humanity, but the combined forces of every species that had chosen hope over fear. Even when hope was harder to maintain than surrender, the real test of the human example was about to begin. The hegemony's first strike came not as expected military assault, but as something far more insidious, the systematic targeting of hope itself. Across the galaxy, carefully coordinated attacks struck not at military installations or government centers, but at refugee camps, medical stations, and reconstruction projects. The hegemony forces, led by their supreme coordinator Vexmoth of the Zephyrian Dominion, had studied human psychology extensively. They understood that humanity's greatest strength was their ability to inspire others to believe in better possibilities, so they set out to destroy that inspiration. On the former mining world of Kepler 442b, where Villani supervisor Vextar had first defied Corvani tribute demands, hegemony raiders struck the children's hospital that human volunteers had helped establish. They didn't destroy the building completely. That would have been too obvious an atrocity. Instead, they sabotaged the medical equipment, poisoned the water supply, and left messages claiming the attack was retaliation for Alliance interference in galactic affairs. Similar attacks occurred across dozens of worlds simultaneously. Food distribution centers were contaminated. Schools built with Alliance support were bombed. Infrastructure projects funded by human aid programs suffered mysterious accidents that killed hundreds. The message was clear. Association with humans brought death and suffering. Admiral Sarah. Chen stood in the Crisis Command Center aboard Alliance Station, watching reports flood in from across the galaxy. Each red indicator on the tactical display represented another tragedy. Another community terrorized by an enemy that struck from the shadows and vanished before help could arrive. 47 confirmed attacks in the past 72 hours, reported Intelligence Director Park, her face grim. The pattern is consistent. They're targeting civilian infrastructure and systems with strong Alliance ties. Casualties? Chen asked, though she dreaded the answer. Over 3,000 dead, twice that many injured. Most of them children, elderly, or medical personnel. They're specifically targeting the innocent to maximize psychological impact. Around the command center, officers from dozens of species worked frantically to coordinate response efforts. But for every rescue ship dispatched, for every medical team sent to help, 2 more attacks occurred elsewhere. The hegemony was forcing the Alliance to spread its resources impossibly thin. "Ma'am," the communications officer called out, "we're receiving a transmission from Supreme Coordinator Vexmoth. He's requesting to speak with you directly." Chen felt every eye in the command center turn toward her. This was the moment everyone had been dreading and expecting. The formal declaration of war disguised as diplomatic contact. Put him through, but record everything. I want every species in the galaxy to hear this. The main screen shifted to show a being unlike any Chen had encountered before. Vexmoth was tall and angular, with crystalline features that seemed to shift and change in the light. His voice, when he spoke, was like music played on broken glass. "Admiral Chen, I am Supreme Coordinator Vexmoth of the Galactic Hegemony. I speak for 17 sovereign species and over 40 billion sentient beings who have witnessed the chaos your so-called Alliance has brought to the galaxy." "Coordinator Vexmoth," Chen replied, keeping her voice level despite the rage building inside her. "If you wanted to discuss galactic stability, there are diplomatic channels available. Murdering civilians is not typically considered an opening negotiation position." "Murder?" Vexmoth's crystalline features shifted in what might have been amusement. "Admiral, we have done nothing but respond to the violence you initiated. When you destroyed the Corvani fleet, you destabilized the entire galactic order. The deaths occurring now are the inevitable result of your reckless actions." The audacity of the statement left Chen speechless for a moment. "We defended ourselves against genocidal invasion. The Corvani came to our system with the explicit intention of exterminating our species. They came to maintain order. Yes, their methods were harsh, but they provided stability for 3 centuries. Since their fall, how many have died in civil wars, rebellions, and territorial disputes? How many worlds have descended into chaos because you destroyed the only force capable of maintaining peace? Chen realized she was facing something more dangerous than Corvani brutality. The Empire had been evil but honest about its intentions. The hegemony cloaked its tyranny in the language of necessity and greater good. What do you want, Coordinator? The dissolution of your alliance and the establishment of a proper galactic government. One led by those with the wisdom and strength to make difficult decisions for the greater good. The experiment in democracy has failed, Admiral. It's time for adults to take charge. And if we refuse, then the attacks will continue. Every day the Alliance exists, more innocents will die. Every world that accepts your aid will become a target. Every species that trusts in human promises will suffer the consequences. Vexmoth paused, his crystalline face shifting into something that might have been regret. We take no pleasure in this necessity, Admiral. But sometimes, to save the galaxy, we must be willing to break a few worlds. The transmission ended, leaving the command center in stunned silence. Chen stared at the blank screen, processing the implications of what she'd just heard. The hegemony wasn't just threatening military action. They were threatening to turn the Alliance's greatest strength against itself. They're going to make us choose, she said quietly. Either we abandon our principles and let them take control, or they'll kill innocent people and blame us for every death. Admiral, Director Park spoke up. We're already receiving communications from Alliance member worlds. Several are requesting immediate withdrawal of human personnel and aid programs. They're afraid of being targeted. The strategy was brilliant in its cruelty. The hegemony couldn't defeat the Alliance militarily. They had learned that much from Corvani failures. But they could force the Alliance to destroy itself by making cooperation too costly in innocent lives. Ma'am, another officer reported, the Antaran sovereignty is formally withdrawing from the Alliance. They're citing security concerns and unwillingness to accept responsibility for human actions. More indicators began flashing on the tactical display as additional species announced their withdrawal. The Grand Alliance that had taken 2 years to build was crumbling in a matter of hours. Admiral, Ambassador Zethara's voice came through the communication system from the diplomatic section. I'm receiving urgent requests for emergency council sessions. Several member species are demanding that we expel humanity from the Alliance leadership to prevent further attacks. Chen closed her eyes, feeling the weight of billions of lives pressing down on her shoulders. Every decision she made would result in death and suffering. If she stepped down, the Alliance might survive but would become exactly what the hegemony wanted, a toothless organization that could be easily controlled. If she fought back, more innocents would die and the Alliance would fracture anyway. Admiral, Director Park said quietly, there might be another option. Chen opened her eyes. I'm listening. The attacks are sophisticated and coordinated, but they require detailed intelligence about Alliance operations. Someone is feeding the hegemony information about our aid programs, security arrangements, and civilian infrastructure. You think we have a spy? I think we have multiple spies. But more importantly, I think they're not all voluntary agents. The hegemony has been recruiting from species that feel marginalized by Alliance policies. They're offering positions of power in exchange for information and sabotage. Chen understood immediately. They're not just attacking our allies, they're suborning our own organization. Exactly. Which means we have an opportunity. If we can identify their agents and feed them false information, we can turn their strategy against them. It was a dangerous gamble, but it was the only chance they had to save both the Alliance and the innocent people caught in the crossfire. Over the next several hours, Chen and her staff developed a plan that would either expose the hegemony's brutality to the entire galaxy or result in humanity's complete isolation from galactic affairs. They began broadcasting false intelligence through suspected channels, creating fictional aid programs and infrastructure projects that existed only on paper. Then they waited to see which locations the hegemony would attack. The results were both horrifying and vindicating. Within days, hegemony forces struck at empty buildings and phantom installations, revealing the extent of their intelligence network and the indiscriminate nature of their violence. But the real breakthrough came when they intercepted hegemony communications discussing their long-term plans. Supreme Coordinator Vexmoth was recorded instructing his subordinates to maintain the terror campaigns, even after Alliance dissolution. using fear to keep potential rebellions suppressed for generations. The goal is not merely victory, his voice crackled through intercepted transmissions, but the permanent elimination of the idea that beings can govern themselves. Democracy is a disease that must be eradicated completely. When those recordings were broadcast across the galaxy, the tide of opinion began to shift. Species that had withdrawn from the alliance in fear started to realize in chaos and order. But between freedom and slave,